You ever get the feeling you were born just to be an afterthought in someone else's family story? That was me. I'm Ava, 35 now, and I used to think I had no secrets. But turns out I had one so big, so buried that when it finally exploded, it took Thanksgiving with it. My parents used my younger sister's health issues as the all-purpose excuse to ignore me for most of my life. I'm not talking the occasional oversight or, "Oh, we forgot your soccer game" kind of thing. I mean complete emotional neglect masked under the banner of, "We're just trying to keep Lila alive." I was 9 when my life stopped belonging to me. My Aunt Camille showed up at our house at 2:00 a.m., puffy-eyed and frantic. "Pack your bag," she said. "Your mom's gone into labor early." Lila wasn't supposed to arrive for another 2 months. Hospitals became the backdrop of my childhood. Lila came into the world small, silent, and wired up to machines that beeped in ways that still haunt my dreams. She looked more robot than baby, and my attempt to touch her was met with a sharp slap on the wrist from my dad. No explanation, no comfort, just, "Don't touch that." And just like that, the house changed. My mom turned into a bleach-wielding dictator. There were hand sanitizer stations in every corner like we lived in a damn operating room. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a clinic with bad lighting. And God forbid I caught a cold. If I so much as sniffled, I was booted to Aunt Camille's or Grandma Edna's. At first I thought it was a mini vacation. Camille had snacks and let me watch old movies. Grandma Edna taught me about cameos and brooches, stuff I didn't know would shape my life later. But even then, the truth started sinking in. I was only welcome when I wasn't around. So I became the easy child. Overachiever, straight A's, science fair champ. I memorized sonnets in 3 languages just for a flicker of attention. I was so desperate I once learned to juggle. Juggle. And when I proudly demonstrated in the kitchen, my dad told me not to throw things around near Lila. What if she gets startled? When I was 13, I practiced a piano piece for weeks for the school showcase. Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. My little rebellion, something beautiful I could claim as mine. The night of the show, Lila had a migraine. My audience, an empty seat. 2 weeks later, the whole family threw a mini party for her 5-minute triangle solo at school. She was 7. By then, she was no longer sick, just really, really good at pretending to be. She figured out fast that all she had to do was say, "I don't feel well," and boom, no chores, no school, no consequences. If she whined about stress, my mom would email the principal. If she complained about my presence, I was told to just be understanding. So I stopped trying to belong. My room became my world. It was the one place Lila avoided because she claimed my vanilla-scented air freshener made her break out in hives. I leaned into the solitude. Books, old perfume bottles, antique jewelry catalogs, obsessions no one else cared about. Grandma Edna noticed, though. She gave me her collection of costume brooches and called me her little curator. Funny how a collection of outdated trinkets made me feel seen when my own family couldn't. My parents loved to parrot that I was just so independent, like it was some natural trait. No, I was just invisible. Nobody cared if I had a test, nobody showed up for parent-teacher conferences. Nobody ever asked what I wanted to be. But if Lila had a sore throat, emergency mode, the whole house went into DEFCON 1. The worst part, I believed them for a long time. That I was okay without attention. That I was the one who understood. I didn't. I just gave up expecting to matter. And here's the real kicker: once I stopped caring what they thought my life started. I joined every school club that didn't overlap with my job at Clarkson's Deli. I worked the register 6 nights a week while studying for AP exams. I aced every class, joined debate team, even started tutoring other kids for extra cash. My parents barely noticed. One summer, I won first place at the state history essay competition. The prize was $500 and a trip to DC. Lila scraped by with a B in geometry, and they threw her a backyard barbecue. Senior year, I got a perfect SAT score. Not pretty good, perfect. 1600. When I told my mom, she didn't even look up from cutting cucumbers. "That's nice, Ava. Can you keep it down?" Lila's studying for her chem test. I wasn't even mad anymore, just tired. So I made a plan. I applied to 18 colleges, didn't tell anyone, wrote my own essays, handled my FAFSA alone. Miss Carey, my guidance counselor, was the only adult who knew. Acceptance letters rolled in like dominoes. Stanford, Columbia, MIT, even Oxford, with scholarships. Lila got into a local community college. Guess who had a catered celebration? I didn't say a word. Not then. But I started saving. Clarkson's let me pick up double shifts. I worked until midnight, studied until 2, and graduated valedictorian. Gave a speech about possibility born of neglect. Nobody in my family caught the shade. When I got my full ride to Stanford, I told them at dinner. My mom blinked. "Oh, honey, that's across the country." "What about Lila?" "She's going to need your help with her classes." My dad added, "And you expect us to chip in for flights? Gas isn't cheap." Lila naturally asked if she could have my room. So yeah, I left. With 2 suitcases, a laptop, and $842 in my bank account. I never looked back. But here's where things get interesting and darkly hilarious. They thought I was working part-time in a dusty bookstore in California, which technically I was, for about a year. But then something happened that flipped the script. A ring. Well, not just a ring. A vintage Art Deco engagement ring that came into the shop with a stack of used books. The guy had no clue what he had. I did. I recognized the hallmark immediately. French 1930s white gold aquamarine center. A piece worth tens of thousands. That discovery. It set off a chain of events no one in my family could have ever imagined. Let's just say Grandma Edna's brooch obsession. It wasn't just a childhood comfort. It became my superpower. And the road from that little ring to what I eventually built. Oh, you're going to want to buckle up? The ring changed everything. Up until that point, I thought success came in predictable packages, college degrees, perfect resumes, corporate ladders. But when that Art Deco ring landed in my lap, all those ideas fell away. What replaced them? Obsession. I spent 2 days trying to authenticate it. Stanford Library didn't have much in the way of jewelry archives, but I found just enough online to trace the hallmark. The aquamarine was real. The cut was 1930s European, and the craftsmanship breathtaking. It was like holding history in my hand. I showed it to my boss, Darren. He was the kind of guy who treated every piece of jewelry like a knockoff unless it came with a branded box. He laughed. "You're reading too much into it, Ava. It's probably a replica." He put it in the glass case for $120. It sold within an hour. And not to some clueless college boyfriend, no. The buyer was a woman who walked in wearing vintage Chanel and left in a Tesla. Her fingers didn't shake when she paid. That's when I knew. She knew exactly what she was getting. And I had just let a 5-figure piece walk out for the price of a microwave. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it in my head, what I saw, what Darren didn't, and what it meant. I pulled out my old notes from Grandma Edna, started sketching the ring, comparing it to vintage auction listings, diving into hallmark charts. I went from mild interest to full-blown tunnel vision. Every free minute was spent buried in gemology blogs, antique dealer forums, and low-res PDFs of estate catalogs. I didn't just want to be good at this, I wanted to master it. So I created a binder, yes, old school. A thick tabbed binder labeled Identifications and Hallmarks. I documented every maker's mark I found, scribbled down stone characteristics, even logged auction results and price fluctuations. The first time Darren realized I was right. 3 weeks later, an older man came in with a battered briefcase full of his late wife's costume jewelry. Darren was about to pass on it for a bulk offer, but I asked if I could look first. There was a brooch in the bottom, a geometric shape with a pink sapphire in the center. The clasp was off-center, the enamel slightly worn, but something about it was right. I whispered, "It's not costume." He rolled his eyes. I pulled up the binder, showed him the Mark Lalique, early 1900s. The piece was rare, one of only a few still known to exist. Darren got it appraised. It was real. It sold for $28,000. Suddenly, Darren stopped laughing. He started letting me handle all jewelry evaluations. No promotion, no raise, but lots of quiet praise behind closed doors. And when a private collector came in asking if the girl with the good eye could look at a necklace for him, well, that's when I realized I didn't need Darren anymore. I launched a website. Just a basic landing page. Discreet vintage jewelry authentication. Appraisals. Consultations. I used a fake name at first, Alina Sloan. No one takes a 20-something woman seriously in that field, especially one who isn't draped in Cartier. But Alina. She got inquiries. A lot of them. Collectors, widows, lawyers handling estate disputes. They'd send high-res images and long descriptions asking if I could provide informal assessments before they paid for full appraisals. I charged next to nothing just to build credibility. Then I invested every penny into courses, subscriptions to gemology databases, and books I couldn't afford. It took less than a year to get my first in-person client. An older woman named Beatrice drove in from Palo Alto. She walked into my cramped apartment past my secondhand couch and IKEA coffee table and placed a velvet pouch on the table. Inside was a diamond bracelet that made my heart stutter. Mid-century modern French, likely 1940s. I gave her my honest evaluation, even pointed out a few things that might lower value. She smiled. I already knew what it was, just wanted to see if you did. Beatrice became my first real client. She referred 3 more. By the end of a junior year, I was making more authenticating jewelry part-time than Darren paid me to manage the entire shop. I told my parents none of it. To them, I was still the bookstore girl who probably lived off boxed pasta and wore thrifted shoes. And maybe that was true, but I liked it that way. Let them believe I was irrelevant. The less they knew, the more I could build. My business moved fast after graduation. I skipped the corporate job hunt entirely. Rented a tiny shared office downtown with a stained carpet and buzzing fluorescent lights. Not glamorous, but I could finally bring clients in without them stepping over my laundry pile. I filed for an LLC. Ava James Appraisals, clean, professional, quietly lethal. By year 2, I was consulting on probate cases, resolving estate disputes, and authenticating heirlooms for insurance purposes. The money was steady, but what really lit me up was the detective work. Each piece was a mystery, each consultation a puzzle, and every time I spotted a misidentified treasure, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. The world outside my family saw value in what I offered. That was new and intoxicating. Back home, though, I was still the ghost. Lila started an online boutique that sold graphic tees with slogans like "Slay every day" and "Coffee before chaos." My parents threw her a launch party. My dad gave a toast about supporting our little entrepreneur. I had opened an actual office that month. I catered my own open house. No toast. Lila didn't make a profit for 3 years. But every time I called home, all I heard was how proud they were. My mom would say, "Lila has such vision. She's a born leader." Meanwhile, my business was paying for my own health insurance and a retirement account. They never asked what I did, and I never offered. Why would I? Every success I had, they'd either downplay or find a way to make it about Lila. So I started having fun with it. One Thanksgiving, I wore a 1930s Cartier pendant to dinner. No one noticed. Another year, I brought wine from a $300 a bottle vintage. My dad grumbled it tasted too dry. I was wearing a Patek Philippe watch during Lila's birthday brunch, sitting next to a woman who once told me, "You really should think about getting a real job like your sister." I smiled. I'll look into it. By year 5, I had 2 employees, a growing list of high-profile clients, and more contracts than I could handle alone. I leased a secure downtown suite, installed custom safes, and began offering travel services. People would fly me out private jets, no less, to evaluate collections before auctions. It got surreal, but none of it compared to what happened next. A letter arrived from a lawyer, handling the estate of one Margaret Ellis, a name I didn't recognize. She had died 6 months prior and left instructions for her jewelry to be evaluated before distribution. One of the beneficiaries had recommended me by name. The collection, massive, over 100 pieces ranging from Georgian rings to Art Nouveau necklaces. As I began cataloging it, I realized something strange. These weren't just valuable. They were rare, historical, and a few potentially undocumented. It was the biggest job I'd ever taken, and I hadn't told a single person in my life. Not my friends, not my employees, not even my therapist. But someone else found out. And what happened after that? Well, let's just say secrets don't stay buried forever, especially not when they're sitting on millions in certified gemstones. I didn't think one estate case could change the course of my entire business. But the Ellis Collection. It wasn't just a high-value job. It was a career-defining moment. You know that scene in movies where someone opens a dusty box and finds the treasure that rewrites history? That was me. But instead of gold coins or a lost painting, it was a sapphire choker from 1910 handcrafted by a private French jeweler for the daughter of a baron. No public record, no existing replicas, just whispers in forgotten auction catalogs. I authenticated it in under a week. That one piece alone was worth north of $400,000. And that was just the beginning. Word got out fast in the quiet corners of the industry. Clients I hadn't even pitched started reaching out. One woman flew me to Aspen to assess her grandmother's fashion jewelry. Turned out her grandma had inherited a set of Russian imperial earrings that had vanished during the Bolshevik Revolution. That commission. Let's just say I stopped flinching when my accountant called. For the first time in my life, I had what I'd never dared to want: power. Not over people, but over my time, my choices, my voice. And that scared me more than I care to admit. Because power, I've learned, invites curiosity. Especially from people who've spent years pretending you don't exist. It started small. My mom called one afternoon while I was reviewing photographs of Edwardian rings for a London auction. Her voice was unusually sweet. "Hi, honey, just wanted to check in. You've been so quiet lately." I blinked. My mom doesn't check in. She forgets my birthday unless Facebook reminds her. "Everything okay?" I asked cautiously. "Oh, just missing my girl," she said. "Lila's been working so hard, you know, launching her third online shop." I held my tongue. Lila's first business was a failed scrunchy subscription service. The second, customized mugs with inspirational quotes stolen from Pinterest. "That's great," I replied flatly. Then she added, "Your cousin Mia told me she saw your name on some collector site. Are you still working at that little bookstore?" And there it was, the bait. I gave her nothing. "Still in jewelry," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Mostly authentication work." She laughed lightly. "Sounds like fun." Fun. Right. That week alone, I'd negotiated a 6-figure contract with a German auction house and been flown to New York to inspect a vintage Chaumet tiara. But sure fun. Calls like that kept coming. My dad started texting. "Hey kiddo, remember that old pocket watch Grandpa gave me? Think it's worth anything?" I knew what this was. They were sniffing around. The rumor mill had reached them. I stayed vague. I'd learned the hard way: once you let them in, they don't just take a seat, they try to rearrange the whole house. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. It was Lila. She DM'd me on Instagram out of nowhere. Lila. "Hey Ava, long time. I was wondering if you could check out some vintage pieces I found. Might be cool for my shop." 3. I stared at the message for a full minute. The last time we spoke, she accused me of being selfish for not attending her second online store launch party, which she forgot to invite me to. I replied politely, "Sure, send pics." She did. 10 blurry images of obvious costume jewelry. One of them was a cheap plastic pendant from a fast fashion brand. I told her honestly, "These are all reproductions. Cute for accessories, but not worth authenticating." She left me on read. The next week, my mom called again, this time more direct. "Honey, I was talking to Lila and she mentioned you were doing really well. We're so proud of you." I almost dropped my coffee. She continued, "We've been struggling a bit with Lila's business loans. Thought maybe you'd be open to helping. Just a little support until she gets on her feet." There it was, the ask. No apology, no curiosity about how I'd built my business, just, "You're doing well, so give." I wanted to scream. Instead, I breathed in through my nose and said, "I'm not in a position to help right now." Silence. Then came the guilt trip. "Well, family's supposed to be there for each other. You know how much we sacrificed for you girls." I swallowed the laugh rising in my throat. Sacrificed. They had turned my bedroom into a creative studio for Lila before my graduation banner even came down. But I didn't argue. Just ended the call and went back to work. I should have known that wasn't the end. 2 weeks later, during a routine quarterly review, my assistant Mia, yes, I named her after my cousin to keep it ironic, walked into my office looking pale. Your sister's trying to schedule a consultation under a different name." I raised an eyebrow. She showed me the email. "Hi, my name is Kaylee. I'm a small business owner looking to get a few family heirlooms appraised for resale." Attached was a photo of me at Lila's high school graduation. She didn't even bother to crop it. That was when I snapped. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in the kind of way that sticks. I called Lila. "No pleasantries. You trying to sneak into my business under a fake name?" There was a pause. Then, wow, paranoid much. "You sent a picture of me, Lila. You didn't even change your email name. Oh, so I'm not allowed to verify you're legit before trusting you with my valuables. Your valuables are Etsy necklaces and flea market junk." She went quiet, then hissed, "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" "I don't think I'm better. I know I'm tired of pretending we're equals." Click. No response after that. But the damage was done. My family knew. And suddenly everyone wanted a piece. Uncles asking if I could look at old rings. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years sending just checking-in texts. My dad emailed asking for business tips. And my mom, she called crying. "You always were so gifted, Ava. We're just so glad one of our girls made it." I nearly choked. That sentence felt like a knife because it wasn't pride. It was positioning, lining herself up to benefit from what she never helped build. I held the line. No money, No business favors, no explanations. But then came Thanksgiving. And that, friends, that's when everything unraveled. Because someone still don't know who decided to expose the full truth. And what started as a family dinner became an implosion I'll never forget. Thanksgiving was always a weird performance in our family. My mom loved hosting. Not because she enjoyed cooking or being together, but because it gave her an excuse to perform for her friends. Fancy placemats, dried-out turkey, shiny smiles hiding decades of resentment. This year, she tried to pass the torch, claimed her back was acting up again. Lila chimed in with how exhausted she was running her business. You know, selling repackaged Amazon jewelry at a markup on TikTok. I offered to handle the food, all of it. What I didn't say, I wasn't going to cook it. I catered the whole meal from one of the high-end restaurants I use for my private client events. The kind of place where entrees start at $80 a plate, and even the Brussels sprouts have their own PR team. You really don't have to do all that, my mom said on the phone. I want to, I replied. And that was true. I wanted to see how they'd respond when perfection showed up without them lifting a finger. When the food tasted better than anything they'd ever made with no effort from Lila, no dry stuffing, no passive-aggressive remarks about how tired everyone was. It was petty, maybe. But after years of swallowing their narrative, I felt like a little theater was overdue. Thanksgiving morning, the caterers arrived right on time. Everything was stunning, plated like it came out of a Michelin-starred kitchen. My mom, of course, kept apologizing to everyone for not cooking like usual. Lila complained that the sweet potatoes tasted too expensive. I played nice. I sat at the table, smiled at relatives I hadn't seen in years, and ignored the tension building in my chest. What they didn't know was that I had a live auction going on in Hong Kong, an original Cartier tiara that I'd authenticated earlier that month. My client wanted real-time updates. So I slipped away after dinner and set up my laptop in the only room my mom never remodeled, my old bedroom. It was like a time capsule. Posters on the wall, my antique jewelry books still stacked neatly on the shelf. I opened my laptop. The auction was heating up. Bidding had crossed the 7-figure mark. That's when Lila barged in. She didn't knock. Of course she didn't. She never had. "Oh my God, are you still working?" she said, eyes narrowing. "On a holiday?" "I'm just checking on a client bid," I replied, trying to downplay it. She walked over and looked at my screen. "Let me tell you something about Lila. She's not subtle. She's also not smart enough to read a spreadsheet without making assumptions." Her eyes darted across my monitor, auction tabs, financial dashboards, email chains with high-profile clients. Her jaw went slack. "What is all this?" Before I could respond, she grabbed the laptop and stormed into the dining room. "Ava's got something to show everyone," she announced, holding the screen like she'd just found evidence of a war crime. 20 people turned, and then everything froze. Because the screen didn't show some small business dashboard. It showed my authentication firm's backend. A client list that included names they'd definitely recognize. A bank account balance that belonged on the cover of Forbes. A pending contract for over $400,000. And the auction live tracking showing a current bid of $1.6 million. For the tiara, there was complete silence. You could have heard a toothpick drop. My dad blinked like he'd just seen a UFO. My aunt whispered, "Is that real?" And my mom laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on," she said. "This must be a joke. Ava still works at that little jewelry shop, right?" I stood slowly and took the laptop back. "No, Mom. I own the authentication firm. That jewelry shop, I outgrew it years ago." Lila's face turned gray. I could see the moment it hit her every time she'd made fun of me. Dismissed me, minimized me. She'd been mocking someone who was now leagues beyond her reach. But my mom, she wasn't impressed. She was furious. "You've been hiding this," she hissed, rising to her feet. "We've been struggling. Your sister has loans. We could have used your help." I blinked. "Help?" I repeated. "I send you $6,000 every month. Quietly, without asking for anything. You thought it was from Aunt Camille, remember?" My dad paled. Lila's eyes widened. "Wait, that was you?" "Surprise," I said. And then the real shouting began. You'd think this would be a moment of reconciliation, of reflection. But no. My mom went full martyr mode. "So you've been rich while we've been scraping by. What kind of daughter does that? The same daughter you ignored. The same daughter who bought her own school supplies while you splurged on Lila's dance costumes. The same daughter who worked double shifts in high school so you didn't have to drive her anywhere." I didn't say those things, not out loud. But I did say this: I gave you everything I could. And you still only saw what I didn't give? That shut the room up, except for Lila, who burst into tears. You were supposed to be the backup, not the star. This isn't fair. And there it was. The truth. She wasn't mad I succeeded. She was mad she didn't. She was mad the family scapegoat became someone powerful. The rest of the dinner was chaos. My uncle tried to lighten the mood by asking if I could look at his wife's pearls. My cousin asked if I was hiring. My mom demanded I explain every dollar I'd made. I grabbed my things, packed up my laptop, and walked out. They didn't follow me, but they didn't forget. Within an hour of leaving, my phone had 27 missed calls. Texts poured in. Mom, how could you humiliate us like that? Dad, let's talk. This doesn't have to change anything. Lila, you owe me. I turned off my phone. Drove home, poured myself a glass of wine, and stared at the city lights outside my apartment window. You'd think I'd feel vindicated. But the truth? I just felt tired. Because success, when it's born out of pain, doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like survival. I hadn't set out to hurt them, but I also wasn't going to apologize for finally stepping out of the shadows. Still, the fallout had just begun. And if I thought that was the end of it, I was wrong. The days after Thanksgiving felt like I'd woken up in someone else's life, a messy, guilt-ridden, manipulative soap opera that I never agreed to star in. The first text I opened wasn't from my mom. It was from my Aunt Lisa. Your mom is devastated. I don't know what happened, but please don't ruin this family. Ruin. Like I was the wrecking ball and not the condemned building. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every message I read made the same assumption that I owed them something. That success meant I had an obligation to erase everyone else's bad choices with a checkbook. Lila took it a step further. She posted a dramatic Facebook status about how some people will lie to your face while sitting on millions. She even tagged me. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. That's cold. Family is everything. Hope you sue her. I stayed silent. Public drama isn't my brand. But I watched. I read every word. And the more I read, the less I felt like the girl who used to beg for attention at that dinner table. I was no longer Ava, the overlooked daughter. I was Ava, the ghostwriter of my family's comfort, and they were pissed that I stopped writing them happy endings. A few days later, they showed up, uninvited, at my office. My receptionist. Mia, yes, the same Mia, who watched this circus unfold from a safe distance, texted me before buzzing them in. Your mom, dad, and sister are here. Said they have an appointment. Do you want me to lie or lock the doors? I texted back, let them up. I met them in the glass conference room, the one with the skyline view. It was the same room where I'd closed deals with private collectors from 5 continents. Now my parents sat at the table like they belonged there. Dad opened with fake warmth. Hey, kiddo, this place is impressive. Lila sat stiffly clutching her designer purse like it was a life preserver. My mom went straight for the throat. We've discussed it as a family, she said, and we think it's only fair that you help out officially. Not just those secret deposits, trust funds, a new house for us, and Lila's education. She wants to go back for her MBA. I looked at all 3 of them, then said calmly no. My mom's smile cracked. Excuse me? No, I repeated. You're not entitled to my money or my success. You didn't build any of this with me. You weren't there when I needed you. You didn't even know what I did until last week. But we're your family, my dad said, frowning like I'd just denied science. We raised you. I leaned forward. You raised me to survive, not thrive. I did the thriving part by myself. Lila jumped in, eyes glassy. I just think it's messed up that you wouldn't want to help your only sister. I almost laughed. You mean the sister who told people I was a loser? Who tried to sneak into my business under a fake name? That sister. Silence. Then my mom said, you're punishing us. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. That was the moment I knew they wouldn't change. They weren't sorry for what they'd done or hadn't done. They were angry that I wouldn't play along anymore. I stood up. This conversation is over. Don't come back here without an appointment. And don't ever show up at my home. My mom's voice rose. You can't do this to your own parents. I can. And I am. Mia walked them out. Security added their names to the do not admit list. And just like that, the final thread snapped. They went nuclear. I received 3 letters in the mail. One from a lawyer, a friend of my dad's, suggesting that given the close family ties, I consider establishing formal financial support for my parents. Another from my mom, handwritten, which shifted from guilt-tripping to rage in under 5 paragraphs. And one from Lila, filled with quotes from self-help blogs and Instagram wellness coaches, calling me emotionally unavailable and materially obsessed. Each went straight into the shredder. I changed my number. Hired a security firm to sweep my home and office. Upgraded my passwords. Made sure every digital trace of my life was locked down tighter than a safe deposit box. For the first time in years, I was living without a leash, but I was also living without them. And despite everything, that loss lingered. Not because I missed them, but because I'd spent my whole life trying to earn something they were never capable of giving acceptance. In their eyes, love was transactional. Be quiet, be helpful, be invisible, and maybe you'll get a scrap of affection in return. Not anymore. I started therapy again more regularly this time. My therapist, Dana, didn't ask me to forgive them. She asked me what I wanted my life to look like from here on out. Free, I said. I want it to feel like mine. And slowly, it started to. I took a week off for the first time in 2 years. Flew to Italy, wandered through antique markets, bought a vintage ring from a street vendor in Florence that turned out to be a forgotten piece from the 1930s. Yes, I still can't turn it off. I mailed it to Grandma Diane. No note, just the ring in a velvet box. She called me 2 days later, choking back tears. I wear it every day, she said, and I think of you. That call meant more than any apology my parents could have ever offered. Because Grandma Diane never saw me as invisible, not once. I went back to work with new energy, expanded the Boston office, hired 2 new researchers, started mentoring a young woman named Alina who reminded me of, well, me, sharp, undervalued, determined. My name started showing up in places I'd only dreamed of before. Articles in major magazines, a TED Talk invitation. One of my authenticated pieces landed in a museum collection. And guess what? They didn't get a single mention. No family credits, no smiling photos. Just me. Because some stories don't need side characters trying to rewrite the plot. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't leave a scar. Not a wound, a scar. Proof that something once hurt. Proof that I survived. 6 months. That's how long it's been since that Thanksgiving explosion shattered every illusion I had about my family. 6 months since I stopped pretending to be the version of myself they could tolerate. 6 months of peace I didn't realize I needed. It didn't come easily. The fallout lingered like smoke after a house fire. Lila continued posting cryptic nonsense online about toxic family members and entitled siblings who forget where they came from. My mom sent one last voicemail, a rambling message that ended with, "We'll always love you even if you've changed." But here's the thing. Of course I changed. I worked my entire life for the right to. And finally, I didn't feel guilty about that. I'd built a life from scratch, no map, no guide, just instinct and grit. The success wasn't handed to me. It was earned quietly and without applause. And now that it was mine, I wasn't going to let anyone else define what I owed or who I was supposed to be. So I moved forward. I bought a new home, not a mansion or a gated palace. Just a sleek, open space filled with natural light, with an office that overlooked the skyline. Every piece of furniture was chosen with care. Every piece of art had a story, including the framed certificate that hung above my desk, the authentication of that 1920s brooch I found in the Westfield estate. The one that changed everything. That brooch wasn't just valuable. It was proof that sometimes the things people overlook are worth the most. A lot changed in my business, too. We launched a new service focused on discreet private education for young collectors, mostly young women often ignored in the antique world like I had been. I created scholarships under a pseudonym for students studying art history and gemology. Quiet money, no press. I didn't need a headline. I just needed the door to be open for someone else who'd grown up being told they were just the backup. Mia, my first employee, became partner last month. She cried in the meeting. So did I. We'd built something real. Something bigger than jewelry or profit. We'd built a place where no one had to prove they deserved to be in the room. And as the business kept growing, something unexpected happened. I found space for joy again. Not just the occasional contentment that comes from closing a deal or proving someone wrong, but actual joy. The kind that makes you wake up excited, that makes you laugh without needing a reason. I started dating again, slowly. No expectations. One night over wine and good music, I told him everything, the whole story. I watched his face as I described being ignored, working in secret, rising quietly, while everyone assumed I was nothing. He didn't interrupt. He didn't pity me. When I was done, he said, "I don't think you were ever invisible. I just think they were blind." And I believed him. I finally stopped going to Sunday dinners. No more pretending. No more shrinking. Instead, I started hosting my own. Small dinners with close friends and a few trusted colleagues. No drama. No guilt tripping. Just wine, good food, and laughter that didn't come at anyone's expense. At one of those dinners, Grandma Diane joined us. She showed up in a powder blue cardigan, her hair curled just so, wearing the vintage ring I sent her, like it was royalty's crown jewel. She hugged me longer than usual and whispered, "I always knew you were special. Just took the world a while to catch up." We sat at the table and talked about art and books and how to spot real pearls in dim light. She fit in better than any influencer or collector I'd ever met. That night when she left, she handed me a sealed envelope. "Don't open this until you feel like you've made it," she said. I still haven't opened it. Because here's the truth, I haven't made it. Not in some final bow-on-top way. I'm just living. Living without shame. Living without trying to prove I'm worth loving. Living without trying to fix people who never wanted to see me clearly in the first place. Living as myself. And that's better than any inheritance, any family acceptance, any photo on a fridge. So what happened to my parents? After that last office visit, they tried reaching out one more time through a lawyer. Something about reconciliation terms and a proposal for shared family wealth. And my attorney sent back 2 words. Not interested. The message was clear. I wasn't coming back. Not to the role they cast me in. Not to the silence they fed me like medicine. Lila. She's still trying to build her jewelry brand. She reached out once through a burner account asking if I'd mentor her. I didn't respond. The bracelet she flashed on TikTok last week, definitely a knockoff. Again. But I'm done correcting her. She can play the expert if she wants. I'm not playing anymore. I won my freedom. I earned my peace. I forged something beautiful out of the scraps they left behind. And now, when people ask me about my family, I tell them this. I have 2 kinds of family, the one that raised me and the one I chose. Because not everyone who shares your blood deserves a place at your table. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away and build your own. To the girl who thinks she's invisible, I see you. To the woman building something in silence, don't stop. To anyone told their light is too much, shine anyway. Your story doesn't end with their limits. It begins with your truth. And mine, it's just getting started. Story 2. After I gave my ex-best friend a much-needed harsh reality check, she went crazy. I exposed her in a way that destroyed her entire life because she attempted to ruin my wedding and get me fired. My best buddy was far wealthier than I was while I was growing up, but I kind of loved it that way. My mother's hand-me-downs were my sole present as Rachel showed off her expensive Christmas clothes to me. I felt pleased for her. When we graduated from primary school, I was also pleased for her. She emailed me pictures from her trip to Disneyland with her folks, joking that I probably wish I were her. My parents could only buy frozen pizza for me. She labeled me poor and laughed at me when she learned. And I laughed with her because I knew that way she treated me now, because I was poor would only help me later. And I was correct. I understood that studying was my only option, so I graduated from high school with a full academic scholarship. However, because she believed she could get by on family money, Rachel left school in her sophomore year. In fact, it was at this time that we stopped communicating. As she's grown up, she's realized she's too good to be friends with parents like me, she added. I matched her intensity despite my own sadness. Even though I knew she had no friends and that a simple text message would likely mean a lot to her, I still sent her a message once or twice a year to wish her a happy birthday or Merry Christmas. We didn't speak though, except from that. All I knew was that she was attempting to become an influencer and was totally dependent on her parents. To be honest, I didn't think I would ever see her again till I was 28. I just got engaged, purchased a modest apartment, and graduated from medical school. I suddenly felt compelled to get in touch with her. I believe all I wanted was for her to see me and feel pleased with me. I expected her to be, but instead, I received the most painful smack in my life. I arrived at the cafe with a cheap but lovely necklace for my fiancé and an invitation to a gala we were attending. Actually, I wanted to get back in touch, but I nearly passed out when I saw her. She wore a fancy suit with the tag still on and used a ton of cosmetics to cover up her aging appearance. I was shocked when she smiled and gave me a hug. I gave her a hug in return, but I remained vigilant. After exchanging pleasantries, the waiter's disguise came off as soon as she received our orders. As if he were a puppy, she snapped her fingers at him. We started catching up, and I soon discovered that she had just been cut off by her group of friends because of a joke she had made. However, she wouldn't reveal the joke. In any case, I realized that this was my opportunity to ask her to the ball. "Paul and I are going to the ball." "Rachel," I remarked, "would you like to attend? I'm a doctor, you see. Attending a ball with a man who is most likely unfaithful." She interrupted me. I simply gazed at her, observing the bitterness in her eyes. 12 years had passed. She was no longer like this. She did the same thing when I tried to speak again. Now, however, she insulted me by calling me a lab rat. She's never encountered a lowlife like my fiancé. I was surprised, and I realized for the first time in my life how pitiful and crazy Rachel was. I pulled out the necklace and handed it to her, abandoning the invitation. She went too far, though, and didn't even try it on or thank me. Whoa, it seems like your folks gave you this as a gift after finding it in my dad's garbage. My mouth fell open. I could feel my cheeks getting hot as my body erupted in anger. I gave her a direct glance. My enraged hands twitched. She glanced up in reply. Her head began to dart about and avoid me instead of making eye contact, as though she was afraid of what I was going to do. It was everything I could do not to get up and take advantage of my 3 years of kickboxing experience on her. I did something even better instead. I just continued to look at her and started making fun of her worst fears. "Hey, Rachel," I whispered softly. "When your father expelled you? What was your age?" She flushed. "Do you recall the moment you understood that without him you were nothing?" She began to cry. "Rachel, I know you. You cry every morning and wish your father would continue to provide for you. I hope all of the men you've dated stay with you. I hope you didn't appear so elderly and that you wouldn't pass away by yourself in a subpar condo you rent in an area of town where you're too afraid to get outdoors." I didn't care that she was sobbing so much by now and that her mascara was flowing. Telling her that this was her last opportunity, I even pulled out the bottle invite and divided it around the table before leaving. I informed Mark about the disastrous coffee encounter later that evening. Although he listened to me with empathy, he cautioned me against re-entering unhealthy relationships. According to him, some relationships are not worth preserving. I assumed it was over when I nodded. After what I said, Rachel most likely wouldn't get in touch with me again. Rachel sent me a message on my phone 2 days later. She apologized in great detail for her actions at the cafe. She says she unfairly took it out on me since she had been going through a difficult period. She accepted my offer to the charity gala at the conclusion of the message. Still uncertain, I showed Mark the message. "What are your thoughts?" I inquired. At my phone, he scowled. "Individuals don't change all at once. It's up to you, though." I gave it some thought and made the decision to give Rachel one final shot. "We could start over," I replied, "but I need her to accept my boundaries. No more disparaging remarks against my family or my life." She instantly agreed. I was anxious to meet Rachel again on the night of the charity gala, but I was also hoping that perhaps she was truly apologetic. Mark and I got there early. The setting was gorgeous since I was a member of the planning team. Rachel entered the downtown historical art museum, which had been beautifully decorated with flowers and illumination. After 1 hour, I nearly failed to identify her. In a deep blue gown that most likely cost more than my rent each month, she looked stunning. More significantly, though, she had a totally different attitude. She was grinning broadly, expressing gratitude to the employees, and acting like a typical kind person. She came over to us and remarked, "Your dress is beautiful, and it has to be Mark. You've been talked about a lot." Despite his astonished expression, Mark shook her hand pleasantly over dinner. Rachel was a delightful companion, admiring my engagement ring and asking insightful questions about Mark's profession. I began to believe that perhaps she had truly thought about her actions and wanted to make a difference. After that, I heard something in the bathroom that chilled me to the bone. Rachel was speaking with a woman I worked closely with who was on the hospital board. "Yes, I have known her since I was a young child," Rachel said. "She was really mentored by me during her time in medical school. I've always had a flair for medicine, but she was having trouble with some of the more complicated ideas. I now work at Memorial as a surgeon." By the sinks, I remained still. Rachel was not a physician. She had not even completed her high school education. To the best of my knowledge, she was blatantly lying to my coworkers about herself and me. I addressed Rachel after waiting for the board member to leave. "What are you doing? You have never been my mentor and you're not a doctor." Before she recovered, Rachel's face slumped for a moment. "All I wanted was to blend in with your affluent medical pals. By lying about me and about themselves, they all appear to be so fascinated by credentials." "Rachel, these are my coworkers. Here, my reputation counts." She broke down in tears, and even though she was obviously at fault, I felt like the villain right away. She cried, "I just wanted to feel important for once." I softened, since everyone here is so successful and I don't go against my better judgment. I said, not wanting to cause a scene, "Let's just get some air. I'll meet you on the patio after getting a few beers." I needed a minute to take in the situation, so I walked to the bar to grab us some water. Rachel was encircled by a group of my university colleagues when I went back to look for her. Her phone caught their attention, and then they gave me odd looks. I got a peek of what they were looking at as I got closer pictures of me from my humiliating youth that I had no idea still existed. I had never really wet the bed at a sleepover when I was 12, but Rachel was in the middle of a narrative about it. "Charlie, could I speak with you for a moment?" I asked Rachel. With a completely innocent smile, she trailed me to a peaceful spot. "What's the matter?" "You are fully aware of the issue. Even so, where did you acquire those pictures?" "Oh," she remarked nonchalantly, "I've had them forever. Only the memories I preserved. I believed that showing your true self to your friends would be enjoyable. The really me. You're fabricating tales to make me seem bad." Rachel lowered her voice and leaned forward. "I was embarrassed in the cafe by you. Did you believe there wouldn't be repercussions?" She took a step back and her attitude abruptly altered before I could react. She shouted loudly, "I'm so sorry about the photos." To the advantage of anyone might be listening, I had no idea these would make you angry. "Now allow me to remove them." She pretended to remove the pictures from her phone, but I could see she had duplicates. My gut told me that inviting her over for the remainder of the evening was a grave mistake. I made an effort to maintain eye contact with Rachel, but she kept straying off to speak with other coworkers. I heard bits and pieces of discussions that, while not explicitly harmful, suggested that we had been much closer friends than we were with her, always in the role of mentor. When calamity hit, I was experiencing a headache from the tension. Rachel unintentionally bumped into me when we were standing close to the silent auction tables, pouring her entire glass of red wine down the front of my cream-colored dress. She made a great show of trying to assist, but all she was doing was spreading the stain further. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy," she exclaimed. It destroyed the clothing. It was created especially for the occasion, and I had intended to talk about the fundraising effort for the children's wing later. Right now, I appeared to have been in an accident. A number of the hospital's benefactors were observing with anxiety. I felt tears of fury welling up, but I attempted to laugh it off. I said, "I have to go clean up," and made my way to the bathroom. Mark, his face tensed with rage, trailed behind me. "He said that wasn't an accident. I was observing her once we were alone ourselves. She got it just right." While the donors in that group were searching, I wiped at the forlorn smear and nodded. "I know we should go," Mark said. "Dr. Patterson can read your speech if you send him an email." I didn't want to miss the chance to network with the chief of surgery, but I couldn't get rid of the sensation that Rachel had more mishaps planned if I stayed, and my outfit was beyond repair. I turned to find Rachel observing us with a faint smile as we departed the gathering early. I recognized then that this was only the beginning. I had no idea what I was getting into by getting back in touch with her, but I had a bad feeling I would find out. I woke up the following morning to many texts from coworkers inquiring about my well-being. I initially assumed they were worried about the alcohol situation, but I was horrified to see the texts. Rachel apparently informed a few others that I couldn't control my drinking after having too many drinks and had to leave the gathering. I phoned Dr. Patterson right away to explain the truth, but I could see by his tone that he wasn't quite convinced. Diplomatically, he added, "These things happen. Just make sure you're ready for next week's board meeting." It was obvious that my professional reputation had suffered. Mark was indignant when I informed him about it. He paced our kitchen and remarked, "This is absurd. She is purposefully attempting to undermine you." I am aware that I responded with nausea, but how can I demonstrate it? It's her word against mine, and she seems to be rather persuasive. Rachel didn't pick up when I tried to phone her to confront her. She responded to my text instead, saying she hadn't mentioned my drinking. "I wasn't feeling good," she merely said. "My coworkers must have been lying or making assumptions," she said. To provide a dramatic effect, Mark advised you to block her phone. Stop any communication. I agreed, but I refrained from stopping her right away for some reason. I wanted to hear what she had to say if she was going to keep lying about me. Rather, I made the decision to begin recording everything. I wrote notes about every exchange and saved screenshots of all our text chats in a folder I built on my phone. I worked diligently over the following week, concentrated on my patients, and attempted to utilize my professionalism to mend any harm to my reputation. I reasoned that after enjoying herself at the ball, Rachel could have moved on. I was completely mistaken. My department head called me into his office a week after the charity event. Normally friendly and encouraging, Dr. Klein turned his computer screen to face me today with a stern frown. "Could you elaborate?" he inquired. A social media post from an account called Medical Fraud flashed on the screen. It had pictures of myself at several medical conferences, obviously drunk. However, I was certain that these pictures were manipulated. In one, my head had been shoddily photoshopped onto someone else's body, and in another, a typical picture of me with a glass of water had been changed to give the impression that I was confused. I responded right away, "This is fake." I've never attended a conference intoxicated. These are doctor-client side photos that have been altered. That's what I assumed. Even if the Photoshop work isn't very excellent, we must address the fact that these postings have been forwarded to other board members. As I described Rachel, my old acquaintance who appeared intent on ruining my reputation, I felt my face burning with embarrassment. I had no option but to inform my supervisor about my personal turmoil, even though it was embarrassing. When I was done, Klein replied, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this doctor." "Will she escalate more in your opinion?" I said. "I really don't know." None of this was what I anticipated. He suggested that I keep a record of everything and that if things worsened, I speak with the hospital's legal staff. I read about what Rachel would do next and was relieved that he believed me as I walked out of his office. That night, Mark and I decided it was time to cut Rachel off entirely. I requested our common connections not to give her any information about me, and I banned her on all social media sites. We reasoned that she could lose interest and move on if she couldn't reach me. It appeared to calm down for a few weeks. The chatter at work eventually subsided and there were no more phony social media posts. I began to unwind while thinking about our impending nuptials. Rather, we had reserved a stunning location for the autumn, a historic estate with gardens that would be a riot of color. Although the deposit was expensive, it was worthwhile for our ideal location. The venue then called me one evening. "This is Andrea from Bellevue Manor, Dr. Thompson. I'm calling to let you know that your requested cancellation of your catering deposit has been completed and to confirm that your date has been moved from October 15 to December 3. The floor seemed to have fallen out from under me. My voice trembled as I answered, "I didn't ask for any changes. October 15th is still the date of our wedding." An uneasy moment ensued. "You signed the modification request form 3 days ago and I have it here. The plans were made by your fiancé's mother." I stated bluntly that my fiancé's mother resides in Colorado. It's been months since she last visited the city. There was a bewildering back and forth until the truth was revealed. The venue had been contacted by someone posing as me, who somehow persuaded them that she was me. Even though I didn't look like myself, I made a lot of adjustments to our wedding plans. We had lost thousands of dollars because the venue had even returned our catering deposit to a separate credit card. I requested that we immediately return to the original arrangements and that I examine the surveillance footage. Although the management expressed regret, they insisted that correct identification was required before any adjustments could be made. With skins in hand and a horrible sense that someone else could have already reserved our date, Mark and I drove there immediately. Luckily, the day we had originally chosen was still open. After realizing what had transpired, the manager was appalled and collaborated with us to get things back in order. However, in order to restore our initial catering order, we had to pay expedited expenses. He validated my concerns by showing us the surveillance tape. It was Rachel, clearly her with spectacles and dyed hair. As we walked away, Mark made a firm statement. "We're filing a police report." This has escalated from harassment to outright fraud. Our report was taken by the police, but they weren't very supportive. Rachel impersonated me without recognizing it. It would be hard to establish it wasn't a simple miscommunication they claimed. Instead, they suggested that we file a civil lawsuit. Things took a sharp turn 3 weeks before to our wedding. My bridesmaid began acting oddly, claiming that the bachelorette party was the reason for the cancellation of dress fittings. At last, I received a direct call from Jamie, my maid of honor. "I have a question for you," she began in a tone that was unusually serious. "Are things going wrong between you and Mark? Because I'm here to you if you need to chat." I questioned, perplexed what she meant. She then sent me an email that she had received from an unidentified account. It included a note that the bride was meant to be aware of, as well as screenshots of text exchanges purportedly exchanged between Mark and another lady. The texts were all made up. They showed Mark expressing his displeasure with me to this woman and arranging to see her at a hotel. Even though the phone number displayed wasn't his and the messages didn't even sound like him, they were convincing enough to worry my bridesmaids. I spent hours on the phone telling all of my bewildered friends that the texts were phony and that my relationship was genuine. Mark, meantime, was heartbroken by the assault on his reputation. He had always taken great pleasure in his honesty, so the thought that anybody might believe he was cheating was intolerable to him. Who is responsible for this? That evening, as he paced our flat, he inquired, "Who works so hard to cause harm to another person?" I couldn't think of a decent response. I could not fathom the degree of evil that Rachel was displaying. This was no longer a small-time retaliation. This was a deliberate attempt to ruin my life. I asked my cousin Joseph, who worked in cybersecurity, for assistance. In order to determine whether we could clearly link the anonymous emails to Rachel, he consented to track them. About 3 blocks from Rachel's apartment, the emails came from a public internet cafe. A few days later, he returned. It's a significant coincidence, but it's impossible to confirm that she had them explicitly. When we brought this information to the police, they once more stated that there was insufficient evidence to file criminal charges. Instead, they recommended obtaining a restraining order, which had a lower standard of evidence. Rachel erupted again while we were contemplating our legal alternatives. I was accused of taking medicine for personal use from the pharmacy by an anonymous caller to the hospital. This led to an automated inquiry that momentarily restricted my access to specific hospital locations, such as the drug storage area. I was so embarrassed that I had to tell hospital security that a vengeful old buddy was targeting me. They swiftly verified that I had done nothing illegal after looking over the surveillance tape from the relevant hours. However, it was a really stressful situation. I had to have another doctor co-sign all of my prescription orders for a few days, which required me to explain the issue to coworkers I hardly knew. Thanks to their outstanding security measures, which demonstrated that I had never accessed the pharmacy unlawfully, the hospital inquiry cleared me in less than a week, but the harm to my image persisted. Colleagues were observing me, wondering if the claims were true. A few patients asked for other physicians. Devastating but subtle. Rachel, meantime, came up with a fresh strategy. I'd never been a huge admirer of Mark's mom, Linda. Although she was courteous to me, there was always a certain frost about her, as she had always hoped her son would wed the daughter of their family friends. Somehow, Rachel found out about this weakness. Mark's mother called him one day with concern. "Are things going well between you and Sarah?" she inquired. "I've been listening to some alarming rumors." As it turned out, Rachel spent weeks making friends with Linda after enrolling in her yoga class under a false identity. After gaining Linda's trust, Rachel started making subtle remarks that cast doubt on my morality and implied that Mark wasn't content but was too devoted to acknowledge it. When Mark questioned her about it, Linda said, "She seemed so genuine. She claimed to be worried since she knew you from college." Mark was enraged. "I've expressed my happiness to you, Mom. Why would you trust someone you don't know?" When I happened to be driving by the yoga studio one day and seen Rachel leaving with Linda, the situation reached a breaking point. Despite her new hairdo, I recognized her right away. I parked and addressed her in the parking lot without giving it any thought. With my prospective mother-in-law, "What are you doing?" I insisted. Rachel pretended to be perplexed. "I have no idea what you're discussing. I am only enrolled in a yoga course." "Rachel, stop lying. I am well aware of what you are doing." She shrugged, appearing obnoxiously composed. "Sarah, you seem so paranoid. Perhaps you ought to discuss that with someone." Before I could reply, Linda emerged from the studio and exchanged confused glances with me. Rachel took advantage of the situation to disappear, so I had to tell Linda everything. Thankfully, Linda believed me after I showed her pictures of Rachel and proof of her harassment campaign. She was appalled to see how deceived she had been and apologized for having doubted me. Clearing the air was a comfort, but having to protect myself all the time was tiring. 2 weeks before our wedding, Mark and I believed we had finally managed to keep Rachel's influence under control. We're being extra careful when disclosing any personal information, and we've informed everyone in our life about her additional security for the wedding. Then I got a certified letter from a lawyer saying that I had caused lifelong nerve damage to a patient named Tyler Benson by engaging in malpractice. In order to prevent a lawsuit, the letter requested a $200,000 payment. Tyler Benson was not a patient of mine. After a fast search showed that he was Rachel's cousin, Mark and I called our own lawyer right away, who told us that even though the claim was clearly false, we still had to reply. In order to address the legal danger, we formally postponed our honeymoon to Japan, costing us thousands of dollars in non-refundable reservations. In a strongly worded statement, Our lawyer threatened to take legal action against me for making a baseless allegation and pointed out that hospital records would demonstrate that I had never treated this patient. As if they hadn't really checked the allegation before writing the letter, the opposing lawyer promptly dismissed the case. However, the strain was having a detrimental effect. I couldn't sleep since I kept leaping at my phone's notifications. At our flat, Mark added more security cameras after we discovered that our car was locked in the garage. Because of the ongoing anxiety, we both lost weight. I was about to believe that things couldn't get much worse when I learned that a whole website had been made specifically to paint me as a dangerous doctor. The website included fake testimonies from patients who said, I had mishandled straightforward operations, been impolitely, or given the wrong prescriptions. Since they included real information regarding my medical profession, some of the stories were so comprehensive that they felt plausible. When I searched for my name, the website came up highly. In just 2 weeks, the number of new patient appointments fell by 30% as individuals who were looking up me discovered this horror show rather than my actual hospital profile. After I sobbed when a patient canceled their appointment, specifically citing what they had seen online, Mark suggested that we find a reputation management agency that specialized in assisting professionals with dealing with internet defamation. They weren't inexpensive. Upfront costs of several $1,000s plus recurring monthly charges. I was desperate though. For me, my career was everything. I had put in too much effort to allow Rachel's falsehoods to ruin everything. Regretfully, matters were first made worse by the reputation management company's efforts. The accusations gained additional attention as a result of their efforts to identify the fraudulent website for removal and promote favorable information about me. Facebook groups in the local community started debating whether I was a hazardous doctor. People who had never been my patients responded by saying they had heard rumors. It was embarrassing for me professionally to have to swallow my pride and beg coworkers to write glowing reviews about me. The majority were encouraging, but I could sense that some people questioned if the reports were true. Was there smoke? The implicit belief that stress was harming our relationship was that there was fire. Both Mark and I were worn out and irritable. Before Rachel could do further harm, we had gone from organizing our ideal wedding to simply wanting it to be done with. Mark said, "Let's just move up the date and do something small. Only our close family will be somewhere Rachel won't expect us after yet another demanding day of damage control." Practicality prevailed even though I detested the thought of letting her win by altering our plans. Only our closest family members were informed of the new date, which we rescheduled for the following weekend at our original location. For some peace of mind, it was worth the loss of another deposit. The venue contacted in a panic the night before our revised wedding date. After receiving an anonymous information that there was a mouse infestation in the kitchen, health inspectors arrived but discovered nothing. Before the establishment could resume serving meals, regulations demanded a thorough inspection, which was not possible in time for our wedding. Mark's cousin Elizabeth donated her backyard as a substitute after we lost our location due to a catering deposit less than 24 hours before our wedding. Although it wasn't the ideal location we had in mind, all we wanted at that moment was to be married without any more trouble. The little outdoor wedding was lovely in spite of everything. With just our closest family members in attendance, Elizabeth's little garden, which included a few rose bushes and a tiny terrace, was cozy and emotional, despite not having the enormous grounds of the house. The fact that we were surrounded exclusively by folks who genuinely cared about us was highlighted by the smaller environment. But while we were saying our vows, a vehicle across the street started blaring music and honking non-stop. As we hurried through our vows, Mark's brother and 2 buddies went right away to look into it. I could see Rachel waiting in her vehicle through the chaos, interrupting our ceremony with a sly smirk. She had already left by the time Mark's brother got to her car, leaving us with a wedding film that was half ruined by automobile horns. That was the last straw. We immediately went to our lawyer the next day and demanded that we pursue more aggressive legal action. He had previously shown reluctance, stating that harassment cases were costly to prosecute and hard to prove, but he now acknowledged that we had enough recorded instances to request a restraining order. During our honeymoon, we organized the paperwork of all the incidents that had occurred over the previous months, gathered evidence, and prepared for court. Although it wasn't the romantic beginning to our marriage, at least our cooperation against a shared foe strengthened our bond. The procedure for obtaining a restraining order was more difficult than I anticipated. We needed to demonstrate a history of harassment and establish Rachel's legitimacy as a danger. The wedding venue scam, the phony medical review website, the fabricated text messages, the phony malpractice claim, and the testimony of witnesses including Mark's mother and my bridesmaids who had received the phony emails were all fortunately well recorded. As we were beginning to make headway, Rachel filed her own restraining order against me, alleging that I was the one bothering her. I had been following her for months since I was enamored with her, going to the places she went to and telling our common acquaintances false information about her. We were forced to attend a very awkward court session where Rachel produced bogus proof photoshopped images that suggested I had been following her phony text conversations, and even a phony notebook that allegedly documented her terror of me. It was obvious that she had worked just as hard to create this other story as she had to annoy me. Thankfully, the court disregarded her assertions and recognized the strength and verifiability of our evidence. The judge approved my restraining order, which mandates that Rachel be at least 500 feet away from me, my house, and my place of employment, even though Rachel broke down under close examination. He cautioned her about the repercussions of making false allegations and rejected her counterpetition. Though I wasn't exactly relieved, I felt vindicated when I left the courthouse. Rachel had previously shown that she was prepared to disobey the law in order to harm me, so a restraining order was merely a piece of paper. Nevertheless, it was a formal acknowledgement that I was the victim and not the attacker. It was calm for 3 weeks or so. There was no new phony website, no one made a false allegation call to the hospital, and Rachel was not seen on the surveillance cameras in our apartment complex. I began to hope that the message had finally reached her. Mark then received an SMS from an unidentified number. "We ought to discuss Sarah, dude. I have information that you should be aware of. At 7 p.m., meet me at Riverside Park. This evening, come by yourself." The message followed Rachel's habit of attempting to cause friction between us, even if the number wasn't hers. Mark showed me right away. "Clearly, it's a trap," he remarked. I mentioned that it's either this Tyler man she utilized for the fictitious malpractice claim or that she's using a burner phone. "Regardless, you are unable to go." Mark accepted, but he wanted to know what they had in mind. "What happens if I go but wait in the car to see who arrives?" Although I opposed the idea, Mark believed that if we could demonstrate that Rachel was breaking the restraining order, it may provide us with further proof. He vowed to leave the automobile in the locked car with the windows up. Mark arrived 15 minutes early for the appointment and parked close to the meeting site at the first hint of problems that night. He continued to video everything using his dash cam. A guy arrived at the parking lot at precisely 7 p.m. and was scanning the area when he noticed Mark's vehicle. He went straight for it. He was Tyler Rachel's cousin, who had submitted the false malpractice claim, and Mark knew him from social media. Mark shook his head and put out his phone to indicate that he was filming as Tyler motioned for him to roll down his window. Tyler's amiable manner abruptly altered. Mark calmly drove away without interacting, leaving Tyler standing in the parking lot. When he got home and showed me the dashcam footage, I felt sick. He started yelling profanities and hitting Mark's car window, obviously trying to get a reaction. He was also recording, probably hoping to get footage of Mark retaliating that could be used against us later. They had obviously been attempting to harm Mark's reputation or get him into a physical altercation that they might use against us in court. We informed our lawyer of this incident and added it to our expanding evidence file. He recommended that since Tyler appeared to be functioning as Rachel's stand-in, we look into him more. She was now prohibited by law from getting in touch with us personally. Tyler had a criminal record in another state for similar harassment, including a conviction for criminal mischief involving an ex-girlfriend's property, which Joseph found out about. This trend implied that Rachel had discovered the ideal accomplice, someone who shared her lack of boundaries and vengeful inclinations. We filed an application to extend the restraining order to include Tyler as Rachel's agent after bringing this information to the court. Rachel arrived to argue against it, pretending to be the victim, and said that my vengeance was being used against her. Things were largely quiet for the following 2 months after the court, who wasn't happy with her performance, advised all parties to keep a strict distance, and made it clear to Rachel that sending anyone to get in touch with Mark or myself would be a breach of the injunction. We began to let up on our watch because Rachel seemed to be abiding by the increased restraining order. At last, Mark and I went to a neighboring lakeside cottage for a weekend. At least it was a little reprieve from the tension, if not the Japanese honeymoon we had hoped for. My mother called in tears while we were abroad. In the middle of the night, pebbles bearing messages that read, "Your daughter ruined lives," had been hurled through their front windows. Devastated that Rachel had focused on my parents, I quickly drove to their house. Mom was obviously upset, while Dad attempted to brush it off as random vandalism. They shouldn't have to cope with this level of anxiety and worry at age 65. We set up surveillance cameras at their residence and submitted another police report. The city police had promised to enhance patrols in the region, but the local cops were more worried. Nevertheless, I was always concerned that Rachel was now targeting my parents. I was, after all, assisting my parents. In her boldest move to yet, Rachel managed to get access to my work email account and sent improper communications to many patients, including remarks about their health that were not professional and the giving of controlled medicines without the necessary procedures. When I got back from my parents' place, I was suspended indefinitely while an IT investigation was conducted. The emails seemed to have originated from my account, and the hospital treated patient concerns very seriously. Luckily, the IT division acted swiftly. They discovered that the emails were sent from an IP address unrelated to either my home network or any hospital machine. Someone with the answers to my security questions, which Rachel would have known from our early years, had reset my password and gained access to my account. After 3 days, the hospital officially informed the impacted patients of the account breach and reinstated me. Strong security measures were also put in place, such as two-factor authentication for all employee emails. Although my department head was encouraging, I could feel that some officials were doubting my judgment as a result of the episode. Even worse, it seems that Rachel had anticipated this result before the IT department could establish that the emails were phony. She had taken pictures of my professional behavior and sent them along with an anonymous complaint to the state medical board. Regardless of the source, the board was required to look into any complaint concerning patient communication. I had to spend a lot of money on a specialist lawyer to protect my medical license. The lengthy and painful procedure required me to contextualize the faked emails with remarks, character references, and proof of the continued harassment campaign. Every part of my life was being impacted by the stress. Stress caused me to lose 15 pounds in a month and suffer sleeplessness. Mark and I had a tense relationship because we were both having trouble managing the ongoing worry. Mark proposed that we look into moving to a different city after one especially awful night when I had a panic attack because I thought I heard someone outside our apartment. Somewhere we could start over. Rachel has no idea. Gently, he recommended. Fresh beginnings, new homes, and new employment. I felt a little tempted. One part of me was angry at the prospect of being forced to leave the life I had fought so hard to create, while another part of me wanted to escape the constant monitoring. I firmly said, I'm not going to let her win. This is my life, my home, and my job. I'm not going anywhere. Rather, we devised a thorough strategy to get solid proof of Rachel's harassment. Joseph recommended setting up a digital trap, a password-protected cloud storage account that looked to hold my private diaries and private data, but was really being watched to follow anyone who visited it. The journals described made-up anxieties and insecurities that would satiate Rachel's desire to harm me. We purposefully left the security vulnerable by utilizing passwords that Rachel would be familiar with from our early years. Then one of our common acquaintances casually remarked in public that I had been using a digital diary to record everything in order to manage my stress. We were surprised by how well the bait worked. Someone used an IP address that could be linked back to Rachel's apartment building to view the phony journal within 2 days. Rachel was not satisfied with only reading the notes. She downloaded them and started sharing passages of them on social media, along with harsh criticism of my pitiful existence and fears. Joseph had installed tracking pixels and digital watermarks that unmistakably linked Rachel's gadgets to the illegal access. Her digital fingerprints from the illegal access were at last incontrovertible proof of her computer crime. Equipped with this fresh proof, we returned to the police. We weren't only reporting harassment this time. We had evidence of identity theft, computer fraud, and restraining order violations. Compared to earlier cops, the detective assigned to our case took it much more seriously. After examining our findings, he clarified that this transcends jurisdictional bounds. Prosecution is made more difficult by the element of digital crimes, but more likely to remain as well. For the first time in months, we will have to work with the cybercrime section. There was a flicker of optimism that Rachel could actually be held accountable for her deeds. The detective spoke the truth about the difficulties. He appeared certain that we had enough evidence to proceed, even though establishing a criminal case would take years, and the standard of proof was high. As the police investigation went on, our lawyer recommended that we file a civil lawsuit as well. Due to Rachel's acts, we brought a thorough case against her for defamation, harassment, purposeful mental distress, and monetary damages. Copies of all our supporting documentation were included in the formal notice of the lawsuit that our lawyer issued to Rachel. We anticipated that the display of force would scare her, but Rachel retaliated by starting a GoFundMe page arguing that she was being legally harassed by wealthy physicians who were attempting to silence her for speaking out against the status quo. Her campaign portrayed me as a strong, vengeful doctor who used my resources to destroy a weak lady who had the audacity to come clean about me. The story was so warped that it was almost amazing how completely reality was reversed. People believed it, which was even more unsettling. Through strangers who sympathized with her made-up misfortune, Rachel was able to donate over $15,000. It became clear during the litigation discovery process that Rachel's retaliation was not an impulsive response to our encounter at the cafe. Since I started medical school, she had been meticulously recording methods to ruin me, and she had been planning it for years. She would methodically attack every part of my life, including my profession, relationships, family, and reputation as detailed in pages of painstaking notes. This evidence made our case much stronger. Rachel's lawyer used her GoFundMe to cover the costs. Rachel vehemently ignored my money's advice to settle the lawsuit, claiming she was the true victim and would provide proof in court. Rachel grew more and more frantic as the court date drew near. Tyler got in touch with Mark once again and said he wanted to meet in private to give an explanation. Rachel groaned as Tyler attempted to incite Mark into a physical confrontation when he arrived at the meeting location, this time with our lawyer waiting close by. Mark quietly left while filming on his phone, understanding that it was just another ruse to undermine our credibility. We added this attempted provocation to our mounting evidence before the court. Rachel's most audacious action to date occurred 2 weeks before to the court date. She came to my parents' house and said she wanted to personally address any miscommunication. Before my mother knew who she was, my father didn't recognize her from the few pictures he had seen. During her brief visit, Rachel took pictures inside my parents' little house. Later, she shared these pictures online with comments that made fun of their sad lifestyle and shoddy furniture, drawing comparisons to her parents' opulent mansion. The last component we required was this restraining order breach. Police issued an arrest warrant for Rachel, who had entered my parents' house against court orders and committed a crime. Rachel managed to avoid arrest for 3 days, during which time she sent a frantic email blast to my coworkers and employer, accusing me of fabricating everything as part of a complex scheme to destroy her. But when she was eventually apprehended at a bus stop, ostensibly attempting to flee the area, her disappearance only served to cast her in a negative light. Some people took her claims of innocence seriously. Mark and I were finally relieved that Rachel was in custody pending a hearing on the restraining order violation, but we soon realized that this was only the start of a new chapter in our ordeal because the criminal case for violating the restraining order was distinct from our civil lawsuit, which was still pending. Our continued involvement, testimonies, and emotional support would be necessary for both. We had already spent more than $30,000 on Rachel's harassment, so we were also worried about the financial burden from legal bills, security precautions, and lost revenue as a result of the harm to my professional image. The idea of ongoing court cases was intimidating. Unexpected assistance arrived from an unexpected place. My hospital's senior partner, Dr. Klein, who had been there for me during the whole situation, put us in touch with a pro bono lawyer who specializes in stalking cases. The lawyer was passionate about assisting victims of this kind of harassment and had previously dealt with a number of medical professionals who were singled out by resentful people. We were more comfortable dealing with the forthcoming proceedings because of the better legal representation. But Rachel had one more trick up her sleeve. After being released on bail with stringent requirements such as ankle monitoring, she persuaded her parents to hire a combative lawyer who asserted that her behavior was caused by unidentified mental health problems. What appeared to be a simple case was complicated by this novel defense tactic. Rachel's lawyer maintained that her acts were the consequence of untreated problems rather than malevolent intent, and that she required therapy rather than punishment. Although Rachel did exhibit notable narcissistic personality characteristics, the court-ordered mental health examination found that she was fully aware of her acts and their repercussions. She was not eligible for reduced capacity or an insanity defense. Her attorney, however, deftly used the diagnosis to elicit sympathy from the public by presenting Rachel as a distressed individual in need of assistance rather than a cunning tormentor. In response, my therapist testified about the extreme anxiety and sadness I had experienced as a result of Rachel's harassment. The psychological harm was severe and persistent, no matter how Rachel was feeling when she did it. A gag order prohibiting me from speaking about the case in public was part of the deal that Rachel's lawyer made as the trial date drew near. According to the rules, Rachel would have to pay a large amount for damages and go to therapy. I would be prohibited by law from telling others about my experience, but I still uphold the restraining order. Mark believed we ought to accept it. He claimed that we could finally go on. No more going to court, no more going through the ordeal again. Accepting, however, would mean that Rachel's activities were kept secret from potential future targets. In return for a peaceful conclusion, the truth would have to be buried. After giving it some thought, we turned down the offer. Even so, our lawyers warned that trials can be unpredictable. The stage was set for a last court battle when the entire scope of Rachel's campaign would be revealed, and I would have the opportunity to finally pursue justice for the devastation she had caused to our lives. I was prepared to confront her one more time and put this nightmare behind us no matter what the result. The retribution of the wealthy buddies comes to an end. On a rainy Monday morning, the trial got underway. When I entered the courtroom, I felt nauseous. Wearing a modest blue dress and her hair tied back in a tidy ponytail, Rachel looked put together as she sat at the defense table. She didn't resemble the glitzy, vindictive lady who had been frightening us. Rather, she appeared to be the innocent daughter of someone who had been falsely accused. I saw right once that this was a staged appearance for the judge and any prospective jurors. Rachel gave me the dejected, hurt expression, as if I had heard her when she saw me. Mark squeezed my hand and reminded me to remain composed even if my blood was boiling. Our lawyer began by systematically outlining Rachel's campaign against us. Beginning with the charity ball event and progressing through each increasingly severe attack, she provided the evidence in chronological order. As the pattern became apparent, the judge's expression got more and more troubled. According to Rachel's lawyer, she was a misunderstood childhood friend who just desired a reunion. "My client just wanted to get back in touch with an old friend," he said. My client's emotional response to Dr. Thompson's aggressive answer was natural, if certainly improper. This spin was so absurd that I nearly burst out laughing. Fortunately, our lawyer was ready. With timestamps indicating they were written years before our coffee shop meeting, she showed me Rachel's diary entries detailing her plans to destroy me. Even Rachel's parents seemed astounded by the severity of their daughter's actions by the third day of the trial. With every fresh piece of evidence, their shocked looks grew as they sat in the back row. Given that they most likely were unaware of the entire extent of their daughter's actions, I nearly felt terrible for them. The pivotal moment occurred when Rachel was being cross-examined. For the first hour, she did a remarkable job of keeping up her wounded victim act, whispering that she had always liked me and wished she could be in my life once more. However, our lawyer gradually eroded her account by pointing out inconsistencies and providing proof that directly refuted her assertions. Rachel eventually lost it when pressed about the sabotage of the wedding venue. She cried, her face twisted in anger. "You deserved everything I did to you. You've always treated me with contempt. Because you had a scholarship, I always assumed you were superior to me." There was silence in the courtroom. Rachel appeared to recognize her error right away and attempted to change her mind, but it was too late. Her outburst destroyed her lawyer's carefully crafted story of mental health concerns and misunderstandings, confirming her evil purpose. In addition to ruling in our favor, the judge imposed a permanent restraining order and mandated that Rachel pay $175,000 in damages for the defamation, mental distress, and monetary loss we endured. Additionally, he suggested that the prosecutor file criminal charges for computer fraud, identity theft, and violating the interim restraining order. I was very relieved as we walked out of the courthouse. The judge's ruling gave me instant approval and formal confirmation that I wasn't insane or suspicious. In reality, Rachel had been deliberately attempting to ruin my life. I thought I would be thrilled, but I was more tired than anything else. I was exhausted after the year of continual concern and alertness. Mark and I got pizza that night and passed out on the couch before 9 p.m. because we were too exhausted to even properly celebrate our win. The fallout presented us with unexpected new difficulties. Rachel's parents told her lawyer they were done supporting her and declined to contribute to the damages. They eventually had enough of helping Rachel out of her problems after years of doing so. This implied that Rachel would have to deal with the loss of her safety net in addition to financial repercussions. Despite feeling validated by the decision, I continued to battle anxiety and trust concerns. Checking the locks 3 times before going to bed, jumping at sudden noises and looking in every room for danger. I was unable to stop these habitual responses as I walked in. Observing this, Mark proposed using a portion of the settlement funds for counseling. He said, "Not only for you." This affected me as well, and I believed that couples therapy would enable us to go through everything together. He was correct. We located a therapist with expertise in trauma and healing. Our bond was strengthened by the shared tragedy, even if the sessions were occasionally traumatic. I got positive professional news 2 months following the trial. My record was completely cleared by the hospital, and I was given the opportunity to join a distinguished research team that was looking into cutting-edge therapies for autoimmune diseases in children. It was just the type of employment I had always desired. My new secret fears were spurred by the position's requirement for regular travel to medical conferences. The thought of being away from home and sleeping in hotels where anybody might locate me threw my anxiety into overdrive. Mark assisted me in creating security procedures that gave me a sense of security, such as checking in at certain times and staying at hotels with strong security while sharing my whereabouts with him at all times. Although it wasn't ideal, I was able to take the job. My parents made the decision to relocate near us. They desired peace of mind since the rock-throwing event had disturbed them more than they first acknowledged. We utilized a portion of the settlement funds to assist with the down payment because the property they desired was just a little bit out of their price range. Making the most of Rachel's attack for our family felt appropriate. Emily, Rachel's younger sister, surprised me with a letter as we adapted to our new normal. She wrote to express regret for her sister's behavior, even though I had only met her a few times as a child. She commented, "I've seen Rachel's jealousy of you consume her for years. When you were accepted to medical school and later received your scholarship, she saved press articles. She was obsessed with what you had accomplished." In addition to being polite, the letter warned that Rachel had been telling inmates that she would exact retribution when the restraining order ended. After documenting this threat, we collaborated with our lawyer to get the restraining order extended for a further 3 years. Now that I had legal rights, I concentrated on repairing my professional reputation. Some co-workers were still wary of me since they didn't want to be involved in any controversy. I couldn't really hold them responsible. People naturally wanted to avoid Rachel since she had caused such mayhem. I showed my dedication to the hospital's purpose by volunteering for neighborhood health projects beyond private matters. I joined the hospital's medical student mentorship program and set up a free clinic for underprivileged communities. The hesitancy gradually subsided as co-workers witnessed my commitment. When I was seeing a patient at one of the volunteer clinics, she said that she worked at Nordstrom's management. As we conversed, I discovered that she had previously been Rachel's supervisor. She casually brought up terminating a worker who had a severe boundary problem and had singled out another worker for a perceived offense. The woman claimed that she simply couldn't let it go. Unaware of my relationship with Rachel, things continued to become worse until we were forced to fire her. I gently shifted the conversation to the patient's medical requirements while acknowledging that she felt like engaging in the same poisonous conduct that I had denounced. I didn't need any more stories about Rachel. My own was plenty for me. Finally, Mark and I traveled to coastal Maine for our postponed honeymoon. A quiet week in a cottage by the sea instead of the trip to Japan we had initially planned. We tried to be a typical couple enjoying their vacation entirely, removing themselves from social media and work. After 3 days, I started looking out the windows all the time and felt like we were being watched whenever we went for a walk on the beach. When we got home, Mark noticed and gently offered that we consult a trauma therapist, particularly for my hypervigilance. My anxiousness was greatly reduced by the specialist therapy. Through EMDR treatment and cognitive approaches, my therapist explained that trauma had rewired my brain to continually expect dangers, and I gradually started to feel secure once more. Allowing new individuals into our life was still difficult for me. Every new person I meet makes me wonder, what if they have a connection to Rachel? What if they are only feigning amity? Mark and I began modestly by throwing dinner parties for dependable friends, progressively growing our social network with their carefully screened contacts. I received an invitation to speak at a medical conference on workplace harassment a year after the trial. The organizers were aware of my experience and believed my viewpoint would be helpful even though they acknowledged that my narrative would be shared with a wider audience and would draw additional attention to me. I gave it some thought before deciding to share my story in an anonymous manner, via a coworker. She helped others without putting me at risk of criticism by presenting my case study without mentioning my identity. Through our shared contacts, we discovered that Rachel had relocated to a different state. Apparently, she had begun afresh with a new employment and a new social group after serving a brief jail sentence for breaking the restraining order. I really hoped that she had actually changed and wasn't simply getting together to attack someone else. Another element was still doubtful. Joseph assisted us in setting up safe social media accounts and kept an eye out for any questionable internet activities. We remained vigilant, but not as furiously as we had previously. Things were slowly getting back to normal. Mark shocked me by telling me we were expecting her first kid on my 30th birthday. A euphoria that I had not believed possible amid the worst days of racial persecution washed over me. However, this happiness was accompanied by fresh worries about safeguarding our expanding family. By establishing comprehensive security measures and legal safeguards for our child, we effectively addressed these worries. We installed extensive security systems, created a trust to safeguard our home address, and ensured that our children's information would be secure at childcare centers and schools in the future. Our lawyer informed us of some shocking information 2 years after the experience started. In addition to sending a notarized letter admitting her misdeeds without pleading for forgiveness, Rachel had finished the court-mandated treatment. In addition to maintaining stable job and housing without any problems for more than a year, her therapist stated that she had made substantial progress in resolving her underlying concerns. It wasn't precisely an apology letter, although she still centered a lot of it on her emotions rather than the hurt she caused. It demonstrated at least some progress in her comprehension of limits and repercussions. I had to confront my own residual resentment in order to accept this possible development. Because of what Rachel had done to us, I wanted her to suffer forever. Reading about her development evoked a range of complex feelings, including bitterness that she was able to go on after inflicting so much harm, and relief that she may not target anybody again. I made the decision to neither reply nor oppose her salvation. Everyone would benefit in the long run if she was truly changing, but I was unaware of her recognition or forgiveness. I chose to concentrate on the lovely life I had created in spite of her efforts to ruin it. Life had taken on a new cadence by the 3rd anniversary of our marriage. After I produced 2 well-received articles and flourished in my research role, March engineering firm elevated me to project lead. Lily. Our daughter was a joyful, energetic toddler who brought laughter into our house. My parents were devoted grandparents who had moved into their new house close by. Slowly, the hypervigilance subsided. Though they were less regular and less severe, I still experienced panic attacks when something brought back memories of that period. In order to signal I need help without having to explain, Mark and I came up with a shorthand for simple code phrases that we could use when one of us was experiencing trouble. While we continued to periodically renew the restraining order, we ceased keeping a close eye on Rachel's whereabouts. We shifted our attention from protecting ourselves to creating the life we desired. I sometimes wondered at how close we were to losing everything at night when I watched Mark read to Lily or looked about our house, which was crowded with people for dinner parties. With surgical accuracy, Rachel had attacked every aspect of my life, including my job, relationships, family, and sense of security. However, she was unsuccessful, despite her constant attacks and careful preparation. We not only made it through, but we flourished. Our happiness, the exact things Rachel had worked so hard to destroy, was the ultimate triumph, not her punishment. What motivates someone to spend years ruining another person's life is still beyond me. Rachel displayed a level of anger and obsession that is beyond the realm of typical human feeling. However, I've given up on attempting to understand it. There are certain riddles that have no satisfactory answers, and pursuing them will only leave you mired in the past. Instead, I concentrate on being thankful for what I have in a career that fulfills me, parents who support us unconditionally, a beautiful daughter who symbolizes all of our hopes for the future, a loving husband who supported me through the worst experience of my life, and the realization that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. Until she actually changes, Rachel stays stuck in her past. The greatest form of retaliation is moving forward, which I did.